Welcome to the show. You watch UAP True 33. I'm John. I'm your host. And tonight, listen, this is not an episode I ever expected to make. And to be honest with you, it's not one I wanted to revisit. About a year ago, maybe 9 months, I told the story of Dr. Amy Eskridge, a brilliant young researcher whose life was marked by harassment, fear, and a tragic end that still leaves more questions than answers. That episode was one of the hardest I ever produced, not because of the mystery, but because of the human cost. Tonight I'm returning to Amy's story for a different reason, not to re-examine her death, but to confront the research she was pursuing, the roadblocks she faced, and the immense forces that decide what science is public and what science gets sucked into the black world. Because Amy wasn't just a victim of online threats or institutional pressure, she was working in a domain that has long had a history of being quietly redirected, classified, or buried. And when you start pulling on that thread, you run into a world of gatekeepers, powerful advisory groups, closed-door scientific panels, entities that meet far from public view to determine which discoveries move forward and which ones disappear. This episode isn't about sensationalism, it's about understanding the system, the machinery that decides the boundaries of human knowledge. And Amy Eskridge's research may have brushed right up against that boundary. So tonight, with respect to her work and the legacy that she never got to finish, we're going to examine the science she was exploring and the forces that may have tried to stop it. This is not an easy story by any means. I had a hard time with the first one that I did. So this one is it's almost more difficult because I understand the dynamics of the story a little more. And we're going to get into the things that she was dealing with also. And we're going to hear from one of her good friends, Franc Milburn, and what he had to say about her unaliving. So this isn't an easy story, but it's one that deserves to be told. So stick with me. You're really going to want to watch this episode.
She thought, she was always very worried that people would think she was crazy, and that's why she didn't tell anybody else. And she always used to say to me, oh, it's because, you're a former intelligence officer, you've seen this shit before, malign actors, I'm not crazy. And, over the course of the year, I pieced together her story. I talked to all the people that she was involved with, and there's no doubt in my mind, she was murdered. She was murdered for what she was working on. And it's a great tragedy to humankind, because not only was she a brilliant scientist, but she was also a beautifully lovely woman. I mean, she used to rescue cats, man, from the forest around her house. She used to bring in these little kittens, and she had about 20 cats around her house, that she'd rescued from the forest. And she was also an experiencer.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of relate to Frank and then also ask him a quick question. I mean, I was involved personally with a green tech company startup that basically had an engine. You pour water into it, the exhaust would be water. It was a cold exhaust, and that project essentially disintegrated. And what you just touched on about the other members of her team suffered directed radiation weapon technology. Could you go into detail about what types of physiological effects those individuals suffered?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, that'd be for you, Frank. What were the physical effects that the other team members underwent after they had that directed radiation weapon?
Okay, well, I had pictures from Amy, and I can talk about it now because she's dead. She doesn't care. Or maybe she does care because she's watching over me. Burns, serious kind of deep burns into the hands, the face, also the back, and also she sent me pictures of her back, and her vertebrae were extraordinarily protruded, kind of almost deformed, you could see all the bones sticking out of her back. And she told me that basically the amount of radiation that she received, that the Sorry, just a minute. The spinal fluid in her spine, it cooked off, and she said that she felt something in the back of her throat like burst, and she had spinal fluid coming down her throat. Okay, because her spinal fluid cooked off, it expanded, and within her spine. And I saw also pictures from other members of her team, the same kind of radiation burns to the face, the hands, and it was normally the side where one were looking out of a window, and that's where you'd get fried. But over a long time, she had terrible gastrointestinal problems as well. She literally had a lot of problems eating. She had to smoke a lot of marijuana in like her later days, just to be able to control not just the physiological effects of what happened to her from the radiation, but also for her stress. And she definitely had post-traumatic stress. That was a psychological issue. But also I saw she sent me pictures and video from, and there's another scientist as well in the frame, whereby there was a window with aluminium shutters on the outside of the window, i.e. the street-facing part, and a directed energy weapon was used, and it actually burnt the aluminium onto the glass of the window.
So Amy grew up in a world where advanced aerospace wasn't abstract. It was dinner table conversation. Her father worked at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, Richard Eskridge. And from a young age, she was surrounded by the culture of engineering, propulsion, and frontier physics. She followed that path with precision, right? She followed basically in her uh, family's footsteps, her father's footsteps. And she followed that path with precision, degrees in physics and engineering. Um, she even had degrees in chemistry and biology, nanotechnology. She was a multidisciplinarian. Um, and she had a reputation for being sharp, curious, and fearless in the questions she asked. And she co founded Holocron, a small research company exploring exotic propulsion concepts, the kind of ideas that sit right on the edge between breakthrough and classified. Amy wasn't dabbling in pseudoscience. And I think that sometimes people assume that she was. She was presenting at HAL 5, the Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society, a group with deep ties to aerospace, NASA, and advanced propulsion research. Her talks focused on gravity modification, space time engineering, and unconventional propulsion frameworks. These weren't YouTube theories. These were structured technical presentations delivered to engineers and scientists. She was building a career in one of the most sensitive scientific domains on Earth. But alongside her research came something darker. Amy reported persistent harassment, online and offline, strange messages, threats, people showing up where they shouldn't be. She told friends and colleagues she felt like she was being watched, targeted, interfered with. And then the incidents escalated. And this is where it gets dark. According to Amy, and later echoed by retired intelligence officer Frank Milburn, she believed she was being hit with directed energy attacks. And we're going to watch a clip of Amy describing these. Um, she described sudden debilitating pain, neurological symptoms, damage to her spine that doctors struggled to explain. Milburn claimed these attacks were deliberate. Amy believed they were connected to her research. Wild, strange things. And, at the time, people were thinking, oh, this is just, crazy talk, right? And now with the Havana syndrome and the things that happened to the people at the embassy in Cuba, it was on 60 Minutes, now you look back at the things that she claimed, and it kind of makes sense. Whether you accept those claims or not, what's undeniable is that her health deteriorated rapidly and mysteriously. But now I want to shift to the break ins and the digital intrusions, right? Amy also reported break ins at her home, people rifling through her underwear drawer, leaving the underwear on the floor. At one point, she claimed that somebody, when her and her boyfriend would leave, they broke in, they cut the wire that was plugged into the wall outlet. It was just a USB charger. They cut the wire in half. And she claimed that there was a man that was staying in an apartment across the street from them and that he was watching them. That at one point she said to her boyfriend, hey, we should go take a picture of that license plate. And then immediately after, a guy walks out of the house with a license plate in his hand, changed the license plate on the car right in front of them as they watched, walked back and threw the license plate on the porch, almost as if to mock them, like I got plenty of these, you can take as many pictures as you want. Just really creepy, scary, stalking type behavior. She told people she felt like someone was trying to shut her down. Like there was two parties. One was telling her to pursue her research into anti-gravitic field manipulation. The other were threatening her. So she had like two forces in her life, that one was encouraging her research, the other one was threatening her. In her final months and her eventual unaliving, Amy's physical condition worsened. Her spine was damaged, her mobility was limited, and she was in constant pain. And then suddenly, she was gone. Her death was ruled a self unaliving. But many who knew her and many who study her case have struggled to accept that explanation, not because they want a mystery, but many who knew her and many who study her case have struggled to accept that explanation, not because they want a mystery. It looks like someone under pressure, someone being interfered with, someone trying to continue her work despite forces pushing back. Frank Milburn, unequivocally, and you're going to see the clip, says that she was taken out. She was unalive. And when he asked a colleague of his in the American intelligence agency, who he said was a, quote, big bloke, somebody you don't mess with, and that guy said, look, this is above me, this is above us, we can't do anything. And the trail went cold, no investigation. The local authorities, the FBI, they weren't investigating anything. Her body was cremated very fast after this, her demise. But now there's been renewed interest in her case, and I've heard some rumblings that there is an investigation. But we'll see what comes of that.
Tired. I'm real tired. I need to disclose soon, man. I need to publish soon because it's like escalating. It's getting more and more aggressive. Like over the past, this has been going on for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And over the past 12 months, it's been like escalating, like more aggressive, more invasive, digging through my panage, like digging through my underwear drawer, and sexual threats over the past like 3 to 6 months. And now I'm like, fuck, I have to publish. Fuck, I have to publish because like, it's only going to get worse until I publish. There's no way out of this. There's no way out of this fucked up situation until I publish.
After, I just wanted to give you guys a brief history, but now we're going to get into what this episode is really exploring. And this is the research suppression, right? It brings us to the heart of the episode because Amy wasn't just dealing with personal struggles. She was working on a scientific domain with a long history of being quietly absorbed into classified programs. And her papers were delayed, her presentations were discouraged, her research was repeatedly blocked from publication. And when you look at that timeline, the harassment, the intrusions, the health collapse, the suppression, it becomes impossible to separate her personal story from the larger machinery that governs frontier physics. So now, with her background understood, we can finally ask the question that sits at the center of this. What exactly was Amy Eskridge working on, and why would anyone want to stop it? Kurt, we're going to get to her research and why it was a threat to these multiple possible powers. But first, we got to look at the machinery behind the curtain. And as I dug deeper into Amy's story, something became clear to me. Her death wasn't the end of the mystery, it was the beginning. Because once you start looking at the forces surrounding her research, the delays, the discouragement, the sudden roadblocks, you begin to see a pattern, right? And it's a pattern that we've seen with other researchers, other people in this field, namely Dr. Ning Li. And I'm going to show you a quick clip about Dr. Ning Li. This is another mysterious situation that surrounds anti-gravitic field manipulation and these spinning superconductors that seem to reduce the weight of objects. Because once you start looking at the forces surrounding her research, you got to start looking at possible motivations, why they would want to stop her research. And the first layer is the laws that control scientific discovery. And a lot of you might not know, but there's actually laws on the books. You know, if they feel that a scientific discovery is dangerous to, national security, they'll take it. They'll pull it into the black, classify it, and do private research in secret. Most people don't realize this, but in the United States, there are laws, real written laws that allow the government to classify scientific research before it's even been published. Not military secrets, not weapons designs, just ideas. Under certain sections of the U.S. Patent Code, if your discovery is considered a threat to national security, it can be seized, locked away, and you could be legally forbidden from talking about it under punishment of prison. And what qualifies as a threat, right? Advanced propulsion is one. Energy breakthroughs, anything that could shift the balance of power, possibly, a car running on water. That's we've heard that before, right? Amy's work lived right in that zone. Now, the second layer is NASA and the quiet redirection of frontier physics. An agency, because NASA, right? It's an agency that does incredible work, but also operates under strict national security constraints. When research touches on gravity modification, exotic propulsion, or anything that resembles off the books aerospace capabilities, NASA has a history of quietly redirecting, restricting, denying, and or absorbing the work. And Amy talks about this in interviews. I may include a clip of that, but she definitely talks about that, how scientists were repeatedly traumatized because they would be working so hard for this breakthrough and they would want the pat on the back. They would want the publication. They would want the accolades that come with that discovery. And instead, they would take it into a black program and the scientists would get no credit for it. Amy's papers didn't just get rejected, they were stalled, discouraged, blocked in ways that didn't make sense for a young researcher with her credentials. It wasn't just academic friction, it felt like interference.
Result that you want to publish, and they say, oh no, that's crazy. And then so that suppresses a lot of publications that maybe are accurate, but they're perceived badly, and so professors are afraid to publish it. But if you have a privately funded research institution, you can just study whatever you want to, and you don't have to worry about tenure. So the other thing is promising results always seem to disappear.
And this is a third layer. And a lot of you may not have heard of this group, but it's called the Jasons. And they're the invisible gatekeepers, right? A group of elite scientists who meet behind closed doors to advise the Pentagon and intelligence agencies on one question: what science should the public be allowed to see? They don't enforce the rules, but they write the playbook, right? They decide which discoveries are safe and which ones need to disappear. For decades, they've evaluated research in advanced materials, metamaterials, directed energy, aerospace breakthroughs, gravity and space-time physics, and exotic propulsion concepts, the things that Amy was working on. So we have to look at the Jasons, exactly the domain she was working on. Now, the fourth layer, and the one that I think is probably the most nefarious, the one that I think could possibly have been behind her eventual demise. And this fourth layer is the private aerospace and corporate black box, so to speak. Um, and this is the part no one likes to talk about because private aerospace corporations and defense contractors have immense power, as we've seen from some of the congressional hearings that have taken place more recently. And if you're familiar with UAP GERB and the crash retrieval programs, this is butting up against those groups. Companies with deep government contracts, companies with their own security clearances, companies that have their own security forces, companies that have every incentive to keep disruptive technologies, especially energy technologies, under tight control. If a breakthrough threatens billion-dollar industries, or gives an edge to a competitor, or risks exposing classified capabilities, there are powerful reasons to shut it down. Amy believed she was being targeted. Frank Milburn believed she was being targeted. And when you map out the interests involved, you start to understand why. This is this is where I need you, the viewer, to follow me carefully. We're not jumping to conclusions. We're not pointing fingers. We're just tracking a pattern. A young researcher working on gravity modification, exotic propulsion, metamaterials. Her papers were blocked. Harassment was escalating. There was break-ins, malware, Bluetooth attacks, health collapsing, a sudden unaliving. And surrounding it all is a network of institutions with the power to bury entire fields of science. This isn't about one event. It's about the machinery behind it. And if we want to understand what happened to Amy and what she may have discovered, we have to understand the system that decides what the world gets to know. To understand why Amy Eskridge faced so much resistance, we have to understand the science she was pursuing. Because Amy wasn't studying something obscure or harmless. She was working in a domain that sits at the crossroads of physics, aerospace, and national security. Gravity modification. It's a forbidden frontier. Amy's core research revolved around gravity modification, which also involves time, space. The idea that gravity isn't just a passive force, but something that might be manipulated, engineered, or redirected. If in mainstream physics, gravity is described by general relativity, the curvature of space-time. But in frontier physics, the kind Amy was exploring, gravity becomes a field you might be able to interact with. If you can alter gravity, you can alter propulsion, you can alter energy, you can alter the entire technological landscape. And that's not science fiction. That's why this field is so heavily monitored. And then we got to get into the next layer, and this is the space-time engineering, right? Because gravity, as we know from the theory of relativity, relates to space and time. So Amy's presentations at HAL 5 weren't vague speculations. She discussed space-time engineering, the idea that certain configurations of electromagnetic fields might produce measurable effects on inertia or gravitational coupling. This is the same conceptual territory explored by NASA's Breakthrough Propulsion Physics program, DARPA's Advanced Aerospace Studies, classified Air Force research into inertial mass reduction, and theoretical frameworks around warp metrics and Alcubierre type geometries. And I know, look, some of this may be, it's like I'm speaking French, but it's mainstream science that's being explored by these defense contractors, black programs, military contractors, and NASA. Amy wasn't alone. She was part of a quiet emerging community trying to understand whether space-time could be shaped the way we shape electromagnetic fields. But the problem with Amy and why they viewed her as a threat was her desire to publish. She felt that this was a science that the world needed to know about, that this was something that could free us from fossil fuels. This was something that could change the whole economic landscape of the world. This could bring people in poverty up to the level of people who are wealthy. Could this have been the threat? Could this have been why she was silenced? The real prize, right? If gravity can be manipulated, propulsion becomes something entirely different. No combustion, no rockets, no fuel tanks, just field interactions. This is the holy grail of aerospace. The kind of breakthrough that would make every aircraft, every satellite, every missile, every energy grid on Earth obsolete overnight. And that's exactly why this research is so sensitive. And this is why science gets classified. Here's the part most people don't know. Research into gravity modification and exotic propulsion has been repeatedly classified since the 1950s. Every time a scientist gets too close to a workable model, even a theoretical one, the work tends to vanish. Sometimes it's absorbed into defense programs, sometimes it's locked behind NDAs, sometimes it's simply discouraged until the researcher gives up. Amy's work wasn't fringe, it was dangerous, not because it was wrong, but because it might have been right. This is the pattern Amy walked into. When you map out the history of this field, a pattern emerges. Breakthrough. Interest from government emerges. Interest, classification review. Classification review, publication delays. Delays, pressure on the researcher. Pressure, withdrawal, silence, disappearance from the work. This is the pattern. Amy's experience fits that pattern almost perfectly. Her papers were blocked, her presentations discouraged, her research was repeatedly stalled. And she wasn't just dealing with academic pushback, she was dealing with harassment, break-ins, malware, Bluetooth attacks, physical symptoms she believed were caused by directed energy weapons. Whether you believe those claims or not, the timing is impossible to ignore. So now we have the full picture, right? You got this young researcher involved with gravity modification, a field historically monitored, restricted, and classified. Her work begins to gain traction. Her presentations draw attention. Her ideas start to solidify. And the worst thing she could have did, she expresses her intent to publish. And suddenly the machinery activates. The laws that allow pre-publication classification, the agencies that monitor frontier science, the JASONs, the scientific gatekeepers, the private aerospace corporations with everything to lose. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a system. A system designed to control the flow of scientific discovery. And Amy walked straight into it. She walked straight into a buzzsaw. And she said that these things existed, that UAPs were real. She was a firm believer. She believed that there was a secret space program. She believed that a lot of these technologies came from reverse engineered craft. But we got to, the vacuum that Amy walked into, we got to examine that, right? Because this wasn't the NASA of 1970s and 80s. The NASA that explored breakthrough propulsion, warp metrics, and gravity anomalies. She stepped into a NASA that had already closed the door on that type of research. A NASA that no longer had a place for the kind of work that she was doing. And when NASA steps back, the only institutions left with the authority and the appetite to handle exotic propulsion research are the ones that operate behind closed doors, the ones that may have viewed her as a threat. So what happens to a young researcher working on gravity modification in a world where NASA won't touch it? She becomes exposed. She's not protected, exposed to academic resistance, exposed to institutional pressure, exposed to the classification pipeline, exposed to the private aerospace interests that see disruptive energy technologies as a threat. Amy wasn't just working on controversial science. She was working in a field that had lost its public guardian. And when there's no public guardian, the shadows fill the space. This is where the machinery begins to reveal itself. NASA steps back. The laws allow pre-publication classification. The JASONs evaluate what's too sensitive, what we're allowed to know. Private aerospace corporations guard their interests like you wouldn't believe. Just Jake Barber. And in the middle of it all, a young researcher tries to publish a paper on gravity modification. This isn't coincidence, it's structure. And this is why I think Amy Eskridge was unalived. I agree with Frank Milburn that some dark forces are afoot, not only in the UAP community, but also in advanced aerospace propulsion research. Power's so powerful, so dark, that Frank's mate in the CIA, the big bloke that you don't want to mess with, told him, this is above us, we can't do anything. That is chilling. In 2026, the United States, a supposed democracy, knowledge is being suppressed. Ideas are being suppressed. and people are actually losing their life as a result. So if you like this episode, please hit the like and subscribe, share it to a friend, share it to 2 friends. This one was difficult. You're watching UAP Truth 33. I'm John. I'll see you next time. Peace.